Oh non, pas eux aussi.
Malheureusement, si. Les enfants représentent un marché énorme pour la psychiatrie. Le nombre de troubles de l'enfance dans le DSM est monté en flèche, passant de 3 troubles en 1952 à 44 aujourd'hui.
C'est 15 fois plus.
Et pourtant, le DSM admet qu'il ne devrait pas faire le diagnostic d'enfant.
In early childhood, it may be difficult to distinguish symptoms of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder from age-appropriate behaviors in active children, such as running around or being noisy. We basically don't know the diagnosis from normal childhood. That's what that's saying.
Le trouble de déficit de l'attention hyperactivité, c'est le terme psychiatrique pour les gosses qui ne restent pas assis en classe, gigotent, courent, grimpent. Le comportement d'enfant typique, c'est ça?
Exactement. Et 20 millions de gosses dans le monde ont été étiquetés avec un trouble mental.
Donc, au lieu de laisser les gosses être des gosses,
les psychiatres disent aux parents que leurs enfants sont des malades mentaux qui ont besoin de psychotropes.
It used to be that you were on the playground, you'd had the weird kid, you had the shy kid, you had the goof off, you had the hyper kid. You can't have that anymore. Now it's all medical diagnoses.
For them to come up with new diseases and new issues and diagnoses in their book, it doesn't correct bad behavior, okay? They can give children all the pills they want. It still doesn't correct bad behavior.
The thinking still is, you must fit into this mold. And if you don't fit into this mold, there's something wrong with you. And if you're not the person who designs the mold, too bad for you.
A child is labeled and then they're brought to professionals who are trained a very particular way. They're all being trained that if the child fits into this category, then we should consider putting them on Ritalin because that's what they do. That is the protocol.
The way the Ritalin will be marketed to the parents is that they will say, this is a drug to calm your child down. What they won't say is that methylphenidate is a form of speed. It's a form of amphetamine, and what we're actually doing is overdosing your child on speed.
It's a stimulant, so naturally it's going to increase heart rate, increase blood pressure, and you put a kid out on a football field on a hot summer day, and his risk of having a cardiac event of some sort has just gone up.
J'ai entendu dire que les stimulants donnés aux gosses avec des problèmes d'attention sont chimiquement très similaires à la cocaïne.
Oui, et le risque d'abus est tellement élevé que le gouvernement américain les place dans la même catégorie que la morphine, l'opium et la méthamphétamine.
Alors ces psychiatres, qui est-ce qu'ils vont droguer après ça? Les bébés?
Exactement. Ils se servent de ce qu'ils appellent classification de diagnostic 0 à 3 ou DC 0 à 3. C'est comme un mini DSM pour les bébés et les petits-enfants. Écoute ça.
We already targeted our school children with ADHD and bipolar. That's already done. That was done 20 years ago. And we're moving younger with DCO3 to the 0 to 3 age group where they're trying to make popular the idea that it's okay to medicate 0 to 3-year-olds.
The idea of a program to determine whether a child from birth to the age of 3 has a mental illness is so preposterous, so absolutely insane, that it's simply an additional part of the insanity that is now extant throughout this country. I cannot think of a program that is more insane than that.
How are they going to diagnose a 1-year-old or an infant with a psychological disorder? How do they know?
You almost have to ask ourselves, if our societies become sick, what are we doing to our fetuses, our infants, our children, that would make us need to have psychiatric medications?
We're rolling dice with life. We're rolling dice with our children who can't even discuss it with anybody. They have no control. They are the helpless victims, and the ones who are supposed to protect them and care aren't armed with the facts.
Si les parents savaient ça, ils seraient furieux.
Ça, c'est vrai. Mais attention, parce que le DSM dit aussi que vous pouvez attraper une maladie mentale de vos enfants.
Tu plaisantes.
C'est dans le DSM.
We're going to talk about some of the proposed changes that are suggested for DSM-5.
J'ai entendu dire que le DSM-5 est encore plus dingue que le DSM-4.
C'est bien vrai.
You've got 374 named diagnoses in DSM. Well, guess what? There's going to be more in DSM-5.
Why do we all of a sudden need a fifth DSM-5? Psychiatry wanted to broaden the horizons of mental health problems, of disorders. They wanted to stretch the disorders so it would encompass more. And to do that, they're going to add more diagnoses.
We need more diagnoses like we need a hole in the head, really. They're not serving a purpose for mankind, all these diagnoses. They're almost laughable, some of the diagnoses.
Ridicule? Vraiment?
Bon, il parle d'un trouble d'amassement si on ne se débarrasse pas d'assez de choses.
Persistent difficulty discarding or parting with personal possessions.
Le trouble d'excès alimentaire, c'est trop manger, trop souvent.
Recurrent episodes of binge eating.
Oh, et il y a un trouble pour les personnes qui se grattent.
So it's recurrent skin picking resulting in skin lesions.
Ce sont des troubles mentaux?
Et il existe aussi un nouveau trouble qui englobera tous les enfants dont les crises de colère sont encore insuffisantes pour l'étiquette bipolaire.
They've created temperate dysregulation disorder to seem a little bit more mild of the condition and include a lot of the younger population in terms of that diagnosis. And what it essentially does, it just broadens bipolar disorder into a whole other new category. And where they don't fit into bipolar, now they can fit into this other diagnosing criteria.
Le filet devient de plus en plus vaste.
Encore plus que tu ne le penses. Ils envisagent même d'ajouter une étiquette pour ceux qui passent trop de temps à l'ordinateur.
Internet addiction diagnosis. It's another example of, just taking something going on in the popular culture that's, pretty widespread and then finding a way to pathologize it.
I know people personally that spend 12, 13, 14 hours a day on the internet or social networking groups like Facebook. So there is something going on there. But is it a condition that we need to then label and drug? Absolutely not.
C'est ridicule.
Oui, mais sache qu'en Chine, le gouvernement a déjà établi des cliniques psychiatriques qui traitent les adolescents pour, je cite, « utilisation problématique de l'ordinateur ». Et ils ont parfois recours à des électrochocs pour les soigner.
Non.
Et si tu trouves ça révoltant, il y a encore une addition pour le prochain DSM qui fait vraiment froid dans le dos.
Sans blague.
Avec ce diagnostic, il pousse encore plus loin. Il s'agit du syndrome de risque de psychose, appelé plus récemment syndrome de symptômes psychotiques atténués.
C'est un nom à coucher dehors. Mais qu'est-ce qu'il veut dire?
A really scary thing that's coming on the horizon is to come up with a whole bunch of diagnoses in there that are looking at people who currently are mentally well-adjusted but have a risk of developing a mental illness in the future.
They're still thinking they can define well before the symptoms develop the risk of a person developing a major mental disorder without any biochemical, biological or genetic test or any physical test whatsoever.
They don't know the cause of a mental illness. They can't treat it, they can't cure it. So how can they launch a preventative campaign for mental illness? It just logically, it falters.
Attends un peu. Les psychiatres pensent-ils vraiment pouvoir prédire un trouble futur?
Eh bien, écoutons-les.
How can psychiatrists know if you're going to have a mental disorder in the future?
Again, that we don't know categorically who will develop psychiatric illness in the future.
It's really hard to say, actually. I don't know if you could 100% predict for anybody.
You can't forecast if one will develop a psychiatric disorder.
Maybe not, or maybe yes.
It's hard to predict.
It's hard to predict.
There's no way to predict that.
Well, I don't think that nobody knows that.
There's no way to tell.
Nobody knows?
I don't think anyone can know what's going to happen in the future.
Ils n'ont pas la moindre idée.
C'est ça. Pourtant, ils proposent déjà de tester les enfants pour dépister des maladies mentales futures.
Pour pouvoir les traiter maintenant.
Bien sûr.
I would hate to see us go into the type of society where people are
locked up for what they may do in the future rather than what they actually have done.
Identifying people who are pre-psychotic would be a huge industry.
Ah, c'est vraiment terrifiant.
Ce qui n'a pas de sens, c'est que les psychiatres continuent de travailler sur le DSM-5, bien que certains des plus influents admettent qu'il ne vaut rien.
Any comment on DSM-5? It's of no use to us in the rest of the world. You know?
Même le psychiatre à la tête de l'Institut national de la santé mentale est réservé à son sujet.
I don't do DSM. I'm not involved. So, and that maybe tells you more than anything. NIMH is not involved with DSM.
Donc, la tête de la plus grande agence psychiatrique gouvernementale du monde ne veut rien avoir à faire avec le DSM.
Cela semble être le cas. Il s'agit bien d'une imposture.
The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual is effectively the story that is being wrapped up in statistics and numbers and categories that when medicine tosses, doesn't fit any of our categories over to psychiatry, psychiatry says we'll find a category, and if we don't, DSM-5 or 6 or 7 will.
I think in 2016 we'll be looking at DSM-6 and there will be 1,425 diagnoses and I'll have 900 of them.
Mais c'est de la folie.
Tout à fait. Mais c'est conçu pour englober de plus en plus de gens sous l'égide des diagnostics psychiatriques.
De façon à tirer profit d'encore plus de comportements normaux.
Exactement.
Bon, si le DSM ne vaut rien, pourquoi les psychiatres? Oh, je sais, c'est une question d'argent, non?
Avec la psychiatrie, c'est toujours une question d'argent. Et ça commence par le DSM. Comme l'a dit Robert Spitzer,
the American Psychiatric Association found out it could make a lot of money by selling it. They've made a tremendous amount of money.
Every time they revise the DSM system, the American Psychiatric Association makes a hell of a lot of money.
Un fric fou? De combien on parle?
6,5 millions de dollars en vente par an.
Ouh.
Mais ce n'est pas juste les ventes du DSM qui rapportent gros. Les psychiatres et les laboratoires gagnent de l'argent chaque fois qu'ils s'en servent pour un diagnostic.
You create disorders so that you can treat it with a drug. It's the ultimate money-making machine.
How many people can we drug? How many labels can we put out there? How many people can we herd into these labels and feed them a drug so we can get richer, make more money?
There's an inherent conflict of interest, and that conflict of interest is driven by the desire to make money. More money, more money, more money than one should expect.
Huge money in the psychopharm business. If you really did the research on these diagnoses, you'd see that 90% of them or more don't exist. They're not valid. Then that's all of a sudden, all that reimbursement from the insurance companies disappears.
So we have to cut the money cord, as well as cutting the DSM cord if we're ever going to really succeed stopping this juggernaut from continuing.
And once again, it's follow the money. And you'll get your answer every time.
Cela m'a vraiment ouvert les yeux. Voyons. Il n'y a pas de test de labo pour un soi-disant trouble mental que le psychiatre ne peut même pas décrire dans son propre manuel. La théorie du déséquilibre chimique est fallacieuse et pourtant les psychotropes sous prétexte d'équilibrer la chimie du cerveau sont prescrits à des personnes de tous âges.
Absolument. Pour 84 milliards de dollars par an, ce qui rajoute 10 milliards de dollars au montant à payer aux assurances sociales ou privées, rien qu'aux États-Unis.
Et nous payons pour tout cela sous forme de cotisation ou de facture d'assurance.
En effet, l'industrie psychiatrique se sert du DSM pour récolter 330 milliards de dollars par an.
C'est presque un tiers d'1 billion de dollars.
Et ça augmente, c'est fou.
Well, the whole system is now a runaway train, but the DSM is the locomotive. And if you took the locomotive off, eventually the train would stop, because there'd be nothing more pulling it.
We're losing the concept of health. Everybody is sick and everybody's got a condition and everybody needs drugs.
You're going to end up with a whole society that's going to basically have to be led around by the hand. But who's going to lead them around? Because they're drugging so many of them.
In psychiatry, you know in your heart of hearts that you're not really diagnosing. You know in your heart of hearts that you can't really treat what you think might be wrong. And you also know that most of what you're dealing with in the DSM is unprovable and unreliable, not a predictable indicator. So what do you have then?
Bonne question. Il semblerait qu'ils n'ont rien.
Mais ils font du mal aux gens.
Ouais.
You're very lucky to go through psychiatry and survive. It really is as simple as that.
Only when enough people rip the veneer away and show that it's just nothing more than a Hollywood set is it ever going to fall down.
It would be good if all the medical professionals who are really practicing medicine and really trying to help people and based on scientific fact and what they can best do to improve the lives of others, if they would recognize, just be able to look at this fact. It's hard to look at it, but look at this fact and be ethical and be honest and clean up the profession by getting rid of this fraudulent part of it. Psychiatry.
Je n'aurais pas pu le dire mieux. C'est tellement évident. Il faut qu'on se débarrasse du DSM. C'est terrible pour la société.
Je sais. Malgré sa précarité extrême, le manuel Diagnostique et Statistique a littéralement impacté chaque partie de notre monde.
Nos écoles, nos gouvernements...
Nos systèmes judiciaires...
Et les médias et l'armée.
Pareil.
En fait, la société tout entière.
Et tout cela sans que personne ne soit guéri.
Le DSM n'est pas seulement un château de cartes.
Le manuel Diagnostique et Statistique est le coup de poker le plus funeste de la psychiatrie.